Okay, let's talk the host file and name resolution. So one thing you may have noticed as you look through Wireshark and things like that is that networks are made for computers, and computers have a really easy time with numbers. In fact, that's kind of their specialty. And everything is essentially reduced to a number at the computer's side. So when we created networks for computers, we, meaning me and the other people who did it, we used numbers. And currently we're using numbers called IP addresses. And there's a list here of IP addresses 10.0.1.5, 192.168.54.127, etc. You get the idea. They're numbers, and they're a whole bunch of numbers slammed together. And the problem is that numbers are not so good for people. People are bad at remembering numbers. We create all sorts of ways that we don't have to remember phone numbers or any kind of numbers. So now we have contacts in our phone and barely have to remember any phone numbers at all. And the same goes for computer systems and computer networks. We've created systems, basically, as long as networks have been around, we've created systems that have allowed us to use those networks without having to remember the numbers associated with each of the machines on the network, especially as the network grew to be more than 4 or 5 or 10 or 20 computers. So the name resolution really is the solution to that. And name resolution is a generic term referring to basically anything that converts a human readable name like google.com into a number that the computer can read, like one of those IP addresses. And there have been a few solutions throughout the years. The first solution, and the one that we're going to talk about now in this video, is called the host file, the hosts file. And we'll talk exactly about what that is. And then Microsoft had their own system called NetBIOS, and that was great for what it is, and it's still more or less widely used today inside of local networks. And then we'll talk extensively about the domain name system, the larger global network for name resolution. So you probably don't know this, but on your computer, you have a file that does name resolution for you, or it could do name resolution for you if you wanted it to. So if you're on Windows, that file is under your C drive, Windows System32 drivers etc hosts. And that's the name of the file, and you can only edit that file if you're an administrator. So you can open it up as an administrator with Notepad, running Notepad as an administrator and edit it. Everyone else, whether you're running Mac or Linux, is in another file called etc hosts. So in the root directory, the etc directory, and the file is called hosts. So go ahead and open it up. Run a text editor as an administrator. And if you're on a Mac or Linux, you can do it from the command line with the sudo command. And edit your host file and add that line if you want to. So 204.79.197.200 space www.google.com. So when you add that line, what that's going to tell your computer is that when you open up www.google.com, instead of using the domain name system that it would normally use by default, it's going to first check that file, that hosts file. And what you can do with that is redirect any domain to whatever other IP address that you want. So in this case, we're using it to redirect www.google.com to 204.79.197.200. And if you type 204.79.197.200 into your browser, you should see bing.com. So what we've essentially done is use the host file to redirect google.com on our computer to Bing. So here's my host file, or at least it was at one point my host file on my computer. And this host file, if you can see down at the very bottom, has some entries in it. Every line that begins with that pound sign or the hashtag mark is a comment, and so that's not read by the operating system. But every line below that, the 127.0.0.1 space reddit.com, 127.0.0.1 www.reddit.com, and the other line, all of those tell my computer that when I search for reddit.com or www.reddit.com to redirect that to 127.0.0.1. Now, we haven't talked about that yet, but 127.0.0.1 is localhost, so that's redirecting it back to my computer. And essentially what that does is blocks me from accessing that website. So I can go to www.reddit.com on my computer, and it's basically going to look like an error. It's going to redirect back to my own computer instead of reaching out to Reddit servers and pulling that. And I use that personally because I have control issues, self-control issues, so I use that to prevent myself from mindlessly opening Reddit and wasting my day. So we talked about Google already, redirecting Google to Bing. We can use this redirect to localhost 127.0.0.1 to redirect facebook.com. Again, you can use it for yourself to prevent yourself from wasting time. So I use it, like I said, I can edit it anytime I want. If I need to get to Reddit or if I need to get to Facebook, I can edit that and remove that line. But it's very helpful for me to have that blocked most of the time. And then the last line there, especially useful for inside your local network, because you know what the IP addresses are inside your local network. And it's a pain to remember sometimes the IP addresses. So what you could do is use that hosts file to assign names like router to IP addresses inside your network, so you can open up your browser and go to http://router and end up at that IP address, the web interface for most likely what is the web interface for your router on your local network. So the host file has a couple weaknesses though. It's not perfect. It's really great for some things, but it's essentially your own personal address book. It's stored only on your computer. It is not shared with anything on your network. It is not shared with the world. If you create the name router and direct it to yourself, nobody else knows what router means. That is only on your local network and or on your local computer. Sorry, it's on your local computer. So if you have a laptop and you take your laptop out of your home network, router would still resolve to 192.168.1.1 if you have that line. And the other weakness, the other big weakness is that it must be manually updated. So you can't share, like I said, that host file is not shared on your local network. If IP addresses change, that's bad. That means your host file is going to be inaccurate. So this was used very early on because networks were small and they didn't change very often, and you could have a host file that stores everything you need, every bit of that network that you need. Nowadays, unless you know what you're doing, really, you're not going to be using that host file. Again, you can use it for these things that I'm using it for. You can use it on your local network. You could use it to mess with your roommates in fun ways, but be careful. Don't screw them up and make them mad. And that's it on the host file. So in other videos, we'll talk more about the other name resolution options, but that's it for our hosts file.